30 seconds to run through the entire day. So I say this is the opposite. I've been told I'm neurodivergent as well. I haven't been, but I think this is more the ADHD end.
I
wish I could say I was surprised.
I have a friend of mine who swears that I'm special. She's very politically correct, and she's an expert in autism and other learning disorders that children can have in the schooling system. She does a lot of fighting for, you know, like your kids, Robert, herself. So, right, we started with Di, who was talking about how he's not particularly unique. So Di's left, isn't he? Oh.
He had to go.
I had to go. God, I prepared a line for him because there's 68 million odd so people living in the UK, and he said there's about 6 people who are like him,
yes.
Which means he's 1 in a million. 1 in 10 million. No, 1 in 10 million. There we go, even better. So basically, don't get into legal wranglings with people over software. It's not worth the money. But go and talk to Di about how you form a contract first to avoid all of that. I think was the basic summary from that.
Specification.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you're a contractor or work in a consulting organisation, put no clauses in about IP, and you get to keep the lot.
I saw you smiling at that.
Oh, yeah. That's answered the question that's been in my head for years. Okay, so.
It's agenda, keep clicking.
Oh, that's an agenda,
Keep
right?
clicking.
Keep clicking. That was something that didn't. That was one of his slides that he didn't show.
He didn't do.
Keep clicking. Right. Service management stream. So these are the ones I was in. So this is me back more in my comfort zone. So this was James. So James, you see, their plan was failure. He was talking about
Next slide.
not gamification, which is a kind of experiential learning. This was about having scenarios and then running through the scenarios and then using that to work out what did we do well and what did we not do well. So one of the things I've picked up from this in the past is about you learn through emotion much better than you do through cognitive reasoning. Yeah, we may forget what we did 10 years ago, but we probably remember what we felt about that psychotic boss that all of us have working for at some points in our career, right? But we may not remember any of the actual details of what was going on with that, right?
Oh, I remember all the details. I used to quite often.
Okay. Well, certainly as an engineer who has been responsible for the reliability of the systems, I have learned from certain mistakes I've made. Fortunately, I've avoided the big outage for over a decade now. But yeah, so this was talking about actually taking time to go out and to look at a scenario in advance of it happening. And one of the key things about this was about making a psychological safe space. Because you're in practice mode, you can do whatever you like and the consequences of it are not enormous. And one of the things he raised here was also about how some of the aid stuff is done. And I haven't been involved in it myself, but I've seen some of it, where you have a disaster scenario, by which I mean like people dying type disaster scenario, and you have people who've got like blood all over their head and they're screaming. There's nothing wrong with them, it's all makeup and all of this kind of stuff. But because it becomes quite real, you feel it. And then you start to realise about certain things that are happening within you, and you can start to learn from that. But it's okay to make a mistake because nobody actually dies in the scenario because it is all completely fake. So emergency services use this kind of thing when they're doing planning for various things that can go wrong. But we can do that within our working environments as well. Various things that we talked about through the day have come up with that, which I'll hook back into in a little bit. Right, Vicky. So everything as code.
People as code. That's
People as code. So my understanding of this, and my apologies if I have not fully got all of the point of this, is that basically it's a way of codifying what it is that you're doing. So it's about infrastructure and technology and stuff like this, but also about best practices and approaches and governance and making sure you have that kind of brought together as a codified way so that then you can reuse, you can share, you can learn, you can put standards in place and you can develop from that and you can communicate with each other rather than having, shall we say, random parts of an organisation. You have more cohesion within an organisation. And I think that was also a key lesson within this, which has come through in several things that I've seen today. It was about having the right level of space. I've heard the term guide rails, used a few times as well today. The right amount of space, but the right amount of structure and rules, and knowing where to make the balance between the two. So I will jump on to Conrad, who's also talking about certain amount of flexibility, shall we say. One of the points that come through this, and as I have been through the Cyber Essentials myself, I understand this, is that it asks questions. As you said, the government is asking us to lie to it, because some of the questions you simply have to answer yes to, but they're not necessarily that practical. And the question here was really about the governance that goes into your cybersecurity approach. And I think the key thing that you were saying is actually, in spite of these frameworks that don't necessarily work that well, the kind of key message behind it is, are you acting responsibly? Are you paying attention to things that should be being paid attention to? If you are, you're generally okay, and if you're not, then you're generally not okay.
The phrase that I didn't use was a defensible position.
A defensible position,
A defensible position. So if you've done something about it, then you've got a defensible position. And you haven't done anything about it, it's an indefensible position. And the ICO, the FCA, when they come to knock on your door because you've done it wrong, if you've got indefensible position, you're not going to come out well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess it's based on like the sort of basic principles of British law, which is the word reasonable, which is always open to interpretation, but we kind of get a feel of
Isn't
that.
it comply or explain? You either comply or you explain why you're not complying.
Well, my experience of going through Cyber Essentials is that people who read what you submit have absolutely no idea how IT works, let alone how to run IT within an organisation. Just from some of the comments that I've had back as you go through this kind of phase where we haven't done the audited version, we've done the self-certification on that. But there's a lot of different things within that, and one of the key lessons that you seem to bring out from this is, if you are buying something from someone, ask the questions. Because there were several points you made where the answer was, no one's ever asked us that before. And some of them were, as you said, like someone's got an ISO certificate for something that's completely separate and not relevant to the thing that you're actually buying. So that you've got an ISO certificate that's simply not relevant to the current conversation. But simply by digging a little bit deeper. So asking some good questions can be good in procurement, and kind of having a diligence to follow through on that. Okay, so Tim joined us remotely. Which worked reasonably well, I thought, certainly with the audio and stuff coming through here. Hopefully it wasn't also projecting out of the mountain
It was
here.
fine, actually. Yeah, it was fine.
It was fine, absolutely fine, excellent. Okay, DevX. So, I mean, a theme of our conference is about having a common, set of language. So why not introduce some new buzzwords? DevX is an area of, in my view, unexploited buzzwords. I think we should have some marketing slides around this. We should have some new products that we can buy, which will make your developers really happy. Then they'll want to do the DevOps thing properly, which has already been sold as being amazing, and solve all of our development problems. And the only reason it's not working yet is because DevX hasn't yet been fully implemented. A bit less tongue-in-cheek version of this. It was about DevX being the developer experience and basically having a way of making their way of working easier and providing them with the services that they need, and again, modularizing, making things able to be reusable, and having that flex between this is the way that we do it, and you have the ability to innovate and do what you want. But when you do that, you're then contributing back into the central, this is the way we do it. So you're always looking to improve, but you're also looking to reuse and standardize as much as possible.
I thought the service catalogue was a good point on that one.
Yes, yeah, his service catalog, and it dovetails really nicely into a lot of ITSM stuff, which is about providing service catalogs for end users. And this is thinking about it from the developer perspective. So it's quite developer oriented in this, but the basic principles of thinking of a user community, thinking about what their needs are, and then doing something to provide their needs, to make their lives easier, and make them work in a more reliable way and a more productive way.
Clearly, his title is focused on principles. I would normally spell that the other way.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was my typo, then I just typed it straight off there.
Marilyn was doing all of these slides about 11 o'clock last night, so
Yeah,
the
yeah.
fact that they even are in order is very commendable. So
It's an
It's
easy
expressed by
mistake.
OCD.
it's
It's an easy mistake. I've got it on my business cards.
I don't think I've ever managed to make a PowerPoint presentation more than one slide long that doesn't have some mistakes like this in it somewhere. So here he's got a point of what's the difference between DevOps and DevX, and just basically, as you can see on the right hand side here, we've got things like stability, their pipelines, etc. And you've got the same thing over here, but slightly different view on it. So it's kind of a nuance of the language. Marilyn, how do you cope with disaster? Right, so here we had quite a bit of sharing from you two who've had experience of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, I think was the term that you went for with this in terms of your own organisations. That was quite interesting, quite a lot of personal stuff coming up in there and quite a lot of risk management stuff as well. So it was a very interesting conversation that flipped from being I felt quite personal, to being quite analytical from kind of one comment to the next. But yeah, key lessons I think coming out from that was from our discussion was that risk management is actually just really difficult. Because it's impossible to know how much effort you should put into something that may never happen. You know, so there's a level of preparation you can do, but getting the balance on that is just really difficult. Right, IT asset management. So this is the stream that I was not in, so a little bit more difficult. So I had a quick chat with Jade, who gave me a very
Yada.
quick Yada, sorry. I'm really thrown by this slide.
So I wasn't actually there either, but Yada was talking about what is involved in becoming certified against ISO 19770-1. Her organisation is going to be, I think I forget what the jargon is, a certification body or something like that. So they'll actually be doing ISO 19770, which is for those who don't know the jargon, apologies, ISO 19770-1 is the international standard for IT asset management. So she was just talking through how that certification process works, so that organisations who want to go for that certification have a better understanding of how to go about it and what that process will look like.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe the feedback was it was a very dull topic, but the presentation was good.
I've had a few standards and I've always come to the same conclusion. It's either a dull topic and a dull presentation, or it's a dull topic and an amazing presenter who somehow manages to breathe life into it. So I'm glad we had the latter, yes.
You've got to build.
Oh, it's got to build to it. Okay, first you prepare, then you do stage 1, then you do stage 2, and then you make your decision.
Right.
Okay, that's a flow that works in a lot of places. Okay, Mark O'Neill, building a business case for third-party software maintenance. Literally no idea what this one was. Right.
So basically,
Yeah.
So essentially, third-party maintenance is transferring your support and maintenance fees that you pay away from the software publisher and giving them to a third party. And so by doing that, because the third party will usually charge, maybe 50% of what the software publisher is charging for the support and maintenance. So by transferring, just paying 50%, you're freeing up a load more money that can then be invested in your business goals. And the key elements around that are, the reasons why you might do it is if you've got a legacy platform, it's pretty stable, you're not making many support calls to the software publisher anymore, you're really not getting much benefit, then that's when the business case, the monetary business case for third-party support is just there because it's so much cheaper than paying support and maintenance. But obviously there's a lot of considerations around it. So Mark was talking around what those considerations are, what concerns your organisation might have and how those concerns might be dealt with. So yeah, so it is, it was good because it was coming very much from that sense of, well, let's use this approach to free up cash that can then be invested back into.
Could you also talk about getting better value out of the third parties?
Well, this is where it gets interesting because he was saying that, sort of 5-10 years ago, a lot of the So we're talking IBM, Oracle, SAPs of this world. They got rid of a lot of their engineers. They downsized a lot of the engineers that worked on the legacy applications. And the third-party suppliers have actually snapped up those engineers. And so they actually often have better technical skills on the legacy stuff than the software publisher does.
Okay.
But the caveat, of course, is because the software code is the intellectual property of IBM or Oracle, they can't do anything with the source code. So, if there is a severe patch that's discovered that they really need to do something about, then they might need to do a workaround or, a problem. They can't actually change the source code in the way that the supplier would be able to. Then the supplier might not actually have the technical skills in the house anymore to do that either. So, again, it's sort of weighing up what your business plans are, what that legacy system looks like, what the upgrade plans are, if any. Actually, he used a really good analogy, which is quite appropriate today, I guess, with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He said he's heard it described as the Chernobylization of your legacy system. You basically pour a load of concrete on top of it, so it never changes ever again.
That's a bit frightening. Have you just wrecked the business model of the software companies who reckoned that they could downsize and keep their profits up just by exploiting their existing customers?
Yeah, quite possibly.
So then your software supplier goes broke.
We can only hope. Not that I would ever want the software supplier to go broke, of course not.
Yes, careful. So, Stuart, build, buy, borrow. Right. So, Stuart. So, this is one of the slide building ones, right? I was warned that there would be some slide builders, but I wasn't told which ones. So, does that have more?
Yeah.
Ooh.
And another one.
Yeah.
Are you looking for a job at Gartner? Ooh. So you were talking here about, as I understand it, resourcing rather than software and technology. And if I get it right, it was buy was to hire people, borrow was to get contractors in, and
Build is to
Build.
train.
it's to train people, it's to hire people in and train them up, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're applying that to, is it just the ITAM world, or?
You could apply it to anything, but in that context, that's exactly to the ITAM world, talking about if you've got a culture that's willing to let people learn on the job and make mistakes, you can build them up and things, whereas if you need the right answer quickly and you've got limited skills, then partners and contractors are pretty much your only choice.
Mm-hmm. I like the way that you've put partners, self-declaration, I'm a partnery type company, all in the middle, so we kind of cover all bases. Yeah.
As long as your partner can mature with your organisation.
Well, that's also part of my marketing slides. Always find the right partner for the right situation. But it's about having the right mix, understanding what it is that you're needing. And then finding the right mix in order to be able to deliver on that, right? And partners make a part of that, as do permanent staff and contractors as well. As I'm sure we still have quite a lot of contractors in. So, right, Rory, tagging. So, if I recall correctly, Rory, this is the game where you run up to people and you touch them.
And then you run away very fast and don't talk to anybody, yeah.
So,
Isn't that called knock and run? It's a different game.
knock and run, you might be thinking of what I used to call knockdown ginger, which is you go and bang on someone's door
Yeah.
and then run away before they have a
Yeah.
chance to open it, and then laugh hysterically from around the corner. Yeah. For some reason that stopped being funny a number of years back. But anyway, yeah. No, this is the one where you run up to someone and touch them, and then they have to go and touch somebody else.
Tic tac.
Tick, tag, yeah. So tagging, that's where it's got about 1 million names. Factors to consider when creating a taxing record. Is this going to build?
It's got to build.
It's got to build. I was going to say, I hope we actually get some factors out. Certain cloud items cannot be tagged, like IP addresses. tagging in the cloud is case sensitive. Oh, I hate the Linux one. Basically, Linux and Oracle is case sensitive. The rest of IT is not case sensitive. I've spent my career in the non-case sensitive side. Have a governance model taxonomy in place so that cloud and on-prem, can work together.
Why
So-
don't you say premises?
Hmm?
Why don't people say premises rather than prem?
Colloquialism.
Sorry.
We're lazy.
Rory says on-prem because he's, makes it sound cool.
It's just the room I was in, I guess. I don't know.
It's like Veggies coffee, being a foreigner, right? When I arrived to UK, I remember reading newspaper, I couldn't understand what it talks about because there are so many kind of abbreviations that we didn't learn in school.
Uh-huh.
You have to figure out what it actually means.
Yeah, and then we have all of the nice little colloquial phrases of speech that we like to use, and then of course they then work differently in different parts of the country. So if you say something in London or you say it in Leeds, it might be the same phrase, but it may be completely different things. So as we have some Warrington-based people up here, I'm sure they're going, no, it means different in London, yeah.
That's obviously why Britain had an empire, managed to confuse the rest of the world.
That,
We
that,
snuck in and took over Wales.
that may have been exactly how it was done. It was all based on confusing colloquialisms. Okay, so back to the presentation. So this, as I understood it, Rory, is basically understanding about how software is being utilised so that you can then
Yeah,
Make
so
sure
it's,
that-
it's just acknowledging, say you had a technology stack in the cloud, you want to make sure that if you are doing cross-charge or chargeback or showback to the business to say, marketing department, you've spent X this month, you need to pay for it. That's the idea of tagging in the cloud.
Mhm.
But the point too about the scaling up and down of services, of course, if you scale down in the cloud, if you scale down to zero, then at that point, why we talk about data strategy is that too many people collapse what they perceive to be the software in the cloud, but they forget then that actually there's data and storage attached to that service too. So you can create orphan data and not get it back, or struggle to get it back and have to flash up the service again to get it. So when you wind down those services, it's just an aid memoir there on that last bullet. Also tag data, if we're talking ISO tags as well, what you don't want to be doing is amending that data. So say, for example, you wanted to put a tag against an instance that said the request ID. That's great data to find out who requested the software in the first place because you can take that value back to the service management platform. If you put John Smith in there, John Smith could be gone in 6 months and you then don't know who requested it. So that's what I mean by primary key standard.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rob. Yes. Right. Alex, Microsoft is revamping the hosting landscape. So changes to the way in which licensing is being done in the Microsoft. That's not the slide that should have been there. Is it one of your slides?
Yes.
Yes.
It does the job.
So would you like to talk to the slide that should be on the screen right now?
I just wanted to say that the majority of the end client organizations, whatever it's written here, is all positive, except when you are hosting your workloads on AWS or Azure or Alibaba or Google. In that case, nothing happened to you. Nothing has changed for you.
Mhm.
That's it. Otherwise, it's very positive. That was the summary slide.
Okay, right. Okay, and then we had Simon. So Simon obviously had a very fascinating. Yeah, oh, I don't remember seeing that. Did I just...
No, I deliberately didn't include it because I knew that you were going to be including it.
Talk about inclusion.
I like this one here. Start small, but make a start.
Yeah, it's really difficult to know where to start, and it can be this massive elephant, but you just got to break it down.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah,
one, I mean,
those are the things.
this applies to so many things that we do within the IT industry and within life.
When you have a broken elephant lying around the floor, blood all over the place.
A messy elephant, yeah. I mean, it can get messy. But that's why you've got to break it down.
So, yeah, there's also, there's quite a lot of terminology within there. And suddenly with your wheel, I was like, I need to go back and look up a couple of these kind of things. But I didn't realise that Asperger's was a completely defunct term now.
Yes, it's got connotations of Dr. Asperger and what he did or didn't do. or is alleged to have done in the Second World War. So
Right.
it's not used anymore.
Right.
When I was diagnosed with Asperger's. But now
is this another great man of the past who turns
Yeah,
out to not
unfortunately.
be quite
Yeah, he
so
turned
great
out to
when
be
he
not
comes under the
so-
surface?
you see lots of experimentation stuff.
Yeah, bloody white male privilege getting away with all sorts in the before times. Yeah, okay. Small changes can make big differences. I like that. I think that's a good point.
It's the definition of chaos.
And
Yeah, that's true, actually. The butterfly wing, isn't it?
yeah. So yeah, and I'd like to reiterate on that. Thank you very much for the sharing on that. I think it's very, very good. It's something that's come in recently. So as a part of, I think I'll just kind of wrap this up now. We had some feedback from something we did a few years ago. There's a guy called James Finister, who again is one of these ITSM industry names, has been around for quite a number of years. And he put out a thing on Facebook a few years ago on a group that I happen to be in, saying to all conference organisers, I challenge you to put something about mental health into your conferences. And I went, fine, okay, let's do that. Primarily because we'd like to have presenters, and that was one presenter like sorted out. So he came and he gave a presentation. And since then we've had Mind come here, we've had some other things on various topics to do with well-being, but we've had something around that. So you've helped us to kind of continue that theme. But he actually, when we had SITS earlier in the year, he came to me and he said a really, really big thank you. That's made a big difference. He said we were first.
Really?
And he said now all the really big conferences, like the Gartners and stuff like that, they're putting one of their sessions in as being something around this general sort of mental health and well-being topic. And that we kind of got in there first. His view was that we were kind of driving it a little bit and helping to make a change. Maybe we were just the first on the step of the societal wave that's happening anyway, right? I mean,
Sure, yeah.
I don't think we can take credit that society's talking a lot more about mental health than it did 20 years ago and 40 years ago, right? That's something that's happening for people who are far more influential than us at that.
No, but I tell you what, if we have managed to influence somebody like Gartner or Forrester or even SITS, then I'm quite surprised and pleased. I don't know.
I don't know whether we had influence on them, but certainly there was a big thank you from him on that.
That's lovely.
And quite a few people as well who were around at the time that he was saying that kind of echoed that. I thought that was quite a nice thing. It's kind of dovetailing into my thank you to the committee members for all of the work that they've put into for this. So what I'd like is if we could have a round of applause for everyone who has. As well. So thank you very much. So to say, as is often the case with these kind of things, you turn up and they kind of run and you don't have to do too much and they all seem to kind of work reasonably well, and there's a couple of little flaws and stuff that you know happen through the day. But the amount of effort that actually goes into making a day like this happen is absolutely phenomenal, as Kylie's looking kind of yeah, I mean, I know Kylie, you've put in huge amounts of effort
Yes.
probably the majority.
No, I wouldn't say that. Marilyn doesn't.
But I was going to say, I said you
It's
and Marilyn, not wanting to make too much of a. This is the contributions of everyone.
nice being back in person, and I think it's actually been a bit of a shock to the system organising an in-person event.
Yeah.
It feels really different, and yet we did loads before COVID in the before times, and yet it does feel like we're almost not quite starting from scratch, but certainly having to relearn how to run an event and how to put things on. So so thanks very much everyone for actually turning up, being brave enough to come into London. And
I was going to say that's next on my list. Thank you to all the speakers who've come here, and obviously a conference about speakers is challenging, but a conference about attendees. Oh, that is like our deepest fear. And if you looked at the figures that we had like 3 weeks ago as to how many people had registered, but this happens every single year. It's the last couple of weeks, it kind of ramps up, and we kind of know it. But then we're like, well, what if it doesn't happen? And we have had a decent turnout of people, and each one of you makes a contribution into that. So thank you very much for that. We hope that you have found it to be a good, time well spent, useful. Part of your yearly calendar, coming here and taking a day off of what you do to help you do better. And thank you as well to the BCS staff and to our audio-visual engineer who's been making stuff run in the background. None of whom would be possible without. So on that, I think we'll wrap it up and let's go have some food.